Episode 3, The Plan of No Return. The weeks following my confrontation with Susie were a blur of calculated steps and quiet resolve. I had spent sleepless nights poring over every detail of her betrayal, every lie she had told. But now, it was time to shift from gathering evidence to taking action. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my boys and the life we deserved. Susie's arrogance remained intact. She carried on with her routine as though our confrontation had never happened, her confidence in the legal system bolstering her sense of invincibility. But I could see through her facade. Beneath her calm exterior, she was watching me, waiting for me to falter, to concede defeat. What she didn't realize was that I was meticulously laying the foundation for a plan that would change everything. That morning, as Susie sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, I casually placed a glossy travel brochure on the counter. The cover displayed a stunning African retreat, a place promising exclusivity, opulence, and escape. The details were deliberate, each photo and description crafted to catch her eye. "What's this?" she asked, picking up the brochure. "Something from an old client of mine," I replied nonchalantly. "Winston Mugabe. He's hosting a high-profile networking retreat. He's always been into these extravagant events." Her interest was immediate, her fingers flipping through the pages as she scanned the images. I could see the spark in her eyes, the longing for something beyond the mundane routine of her double life. "Are you going?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not my thing." Winston mentioned he's looking for new faces, though people who might be interested in opportunities like this. She looked at me, her curiosity barely hidden. "It sounds interesting." "It does," I agreed, pretending to dismiss the idea. I walked away, leaving the brochure in her hands. The seed had been planted. Over the next week, I began feeding her more details, carefully crafting a narrative around Winston Mugabe. I told her about his success, his larger-than-life personality, and his exclusive connections. Susie listened intently, her intrigue growing with every mention of his name. I kept my tone neutral, dropping just enough hints to keep her curious without arousing suspicion. Meanwhile, Winston and I were working behind the scenes to finalize the plan. He was more than willing to help, his charm and resources perfect for the role I needed him to play. Together, we created an invitation that would be impossible for Susie to resist: a chance to join an elite group of professionals at a luxurious African retreat. It was the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed of, a world away from her secrets and lies, a place where she could imagine herself as someone else entirely. The official invitation arrived in Susie's inbox a few days later. The email was elegant, the tone warm and inviting. Winston described the retreat as a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a chance to connect with influential figures and explore new horizons. The email ended with a personal note: "Jack spoke highly of you, Susie. I believe you'd bring something truly special to our event." She read the email aloud to me that evening, her excitement palpable. "This is incredible," she said, clutching her phone. "Jack, are you sure you're okay with me going?" "Of course," I replied with a reassuring smile. "I think it'll be good for you. You've been working so hard lately, you deserve this." Her relief and gratitude spilled over. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "I really mean it." Watching her plan for the trip was almost surreal. She spent hours researching the retreat, shopping for the perfect outfits, and asking me endless questions about Winston and his connections. I answered her questions carefully, building the illusion of an opportunity that was both thrilling and legitimate. As the departure date approached, I worked tirelessly to ensure every detail was perfect. Winston arranged for a private car to pick Susie up, adding an extra layer of exclusivity to the experience. I made sure her documents were in order, her suitcase packed, and every logistical hurdle smoothed out. Susie was glowing with excitement, completely unaware of the true nature of the trip she was about to embark on. On the morning of her departure, the boys were still asleep as Susie stood by the door, ready to leave. She looked radiant, her confidence and excitement masking the lies she had built her life on. "Thank you again for letting me do this," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. I replied, my voice steady. "Let's go. Enjoy yourself." The car pulled away, carrying us toward what she believed was a dream come true. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions: relief, anticipation, and a pang of guilt. But I reminded myself of why I was doing this. Susie had chosen her path, and I was simply ensuring that she walked it to its inevitable conclusion. Susie's betrayal had been the catalyst. It was the first real step toward reclaiming control, not just of my life but of my future. For her, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one she believed would elevate her to a life she had always craved. For me, it was a plan so calculated and final that there would be no way back. The drive to the airport had been uneventful, but the sense of anticipation that radiated from Susie was undeniable. She chatted endlessly with the driver, basking in the aura of exclusivity surrounding her invitation. She was leaving behind her responsibilities, her lies, and, most importantly, me. Hours later, Susie arrived in Africa, where Winston's arrangements had already been set into motion. The retreat's allure was magnetic, a sprawling villa overlooking the savannah, luxurious accommodations, and a promise of untapped opportunities. Every detail had been designed to seduce her into believing she was stepping into a new world of influence and power. The highlight of the retreat, however, was the gala aboard Winston's private yacht, a gathering of select elites, cloaked in the promise of connections and prestige. It was an event Susie had envisioned herself a part of for years, and now, she believed she was finally arriving. The evening of the gala, Susie stepped onto the yacht, her confidence palpable as she soaked in the grandeur around her. The yacht itself was breathtaking, polished wood, gleaming brass, and crystal chandeliers casting warm light across the deck. Guests mingled, dressed in designer attire, holding glasses of champagne that sparkled like liquid gold. Winston was the perfect host, his charisma filling every corner of the yacht. Tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding an air of authority, he greeted Susie warmly, taking her hand in his. "Susie," he said, his smile dazzling, "it's an honor to finally meet you in person. Jack spoke so highly of you." Her face lit up at the mention of my name, though it was clear she hadn't expected it to come up. "Thank you, Winston," she replied, her voice brimming with excitement. "This is incredible. I can't believe I'm actually here." "Believe it," Winston said with a laugh, gesturing for her to join the other guests. "Tonight is just the beginning." As the night unfolded, Susie found herself swept up in the atmosphere. Winston's guests were carefully chosen, a mix of influential figures and well-rehearsed accomplices who played their parts perfectly. They flattered her, asked her about her ambitions, and made her feel like she belonged among them. For Susie, it was intoxicating. She was no longer the mother and wife juggling lies at home, she was someone new, someone important. Winston, ever the master manipulator, ensured Susie never felt out of place. He introduced her to guests, shared anecdotes about his own rise to success, and painted a vivid picture of the life she could have if she played her cards right. Every word, every gesture was deliberate, designed to draw her further into his web. As the night wore on, Winston invited Susie to join him on the upper deck, away from the crowd. The air was cool, the stars bright against the inky sky, and the sound of the waves provided a soothing backdrop. It was the perfect setting for what came next. "I hope you're enjoying yourself," Winston said, handing her a glass of champagne. "More than I can put into words," Susie replied, her voice tinged with awe. "This is beyond anything I've ever imagined." As the night deepened and the yacht glided smoothly over the waves, Susie and Winston lingered on the upper deck, the soft glow of lanterns casting a golden hue around them. The gentle rocking of the yacht combined with the cool night breeze created an atmosphere of intimacy that was impossible to ignore. Winston leaned casually against the railing, a glass of champagne in his hand, his gaze steady as he watched her. "This night suits you, Susie," he said, his voice smooth. "You belong in a place like this, away from the noise, the chaos, the expectations." Susie smiled, her cheeks flushed from the wine and the intoxicating environment. "It feels freeing," she admitted, looking out over the vast expanse of the ocean. "Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." Winston leaned closer, his tone dropping to a near whisper. "That's because you are. This is the life you deserve, one where you're not confined by anyone else's rules, where you can be the woman you've always wanted to be." Susie looked at him, her expression torn between excitement and hesitation. "It's tempting," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper, "to leave it all behind, to start over." He smiled, stepping closer. "Why not? What's holding you back? Obligation? Routine? You're better than that, Susie. You deserve more." His words sent a shiver through her, a mix of exhilaration and unease. She glanced at him, her mind racing. Winston's presence was magnetic, his confidence and charm irresistible. He represented everything she craved: power, freedom, validation. She looked away, her thoughts swirling. The life she had left behind, the one filled with lies, mundane routines, And a marriage that felt more like a prison felt so far away in this moment. With Winston, she felt seen, understood, and desired. She then told Winston about the hardship and loneliness she had experienced. Winston tilted his head, his smile softening. "I understand. Come with me," he said, his words deliberate. "Let's leave this behind, right now." Her breath caught, and she stared at him, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I mean exactly that," he replied, his tone steady. "Come with me, we can leave tonight, just the two of us, no distractions, no interruptions, just freedom." Susie hesitated, her mind reeling. The offer was irresistible, yet terrifying. It was the embodiment of everything she had craved: adventure, escape, reinvention, but it was also a leap into the unknown. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Completely," Winston said, his gaze unwavering. "This is your chance, Susie, a fresh start, no ties, no regrets, just us." Her pulse quickened, and for a moment, doubt flickered in her eyes, but then she thought of Jack, his steady presence, his calm demeanor, his predictable life. She thought of the lies she had spun, the choices she had made, and the suffocating weight of it all, and suddenly, the idea of leaving didn't seem so frightening. "Yes," she said finally, her voice firm, "I'll go with you." Winston's smile broadened, and he extended a hand to her. "Then let's not waste another second." Susie placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her across the deck toward the smaller vessel docked alongside the yacht. The sleek, midnight black boat glistened under the moonlight, its design exuding exclusivity and power. It was the epitome of everything she had dreamed of, a life far removed from the mundane and the ordinary. As they stepped aboard, Winston helped her down into the plush seating area, the interior of the boat even more luxurious than she had imagined. Soft leather, polished wood, and a faint scent of expensive cologne filled the air. The crew moved efficiently, preparing for departure, their professionalism reinforcing the sense of importance surrounding the moment. The smaller boat picked up speed, slicing through the water with ease. Winston moved to sit beside her, his presence commanding yet comforting. "You've made the right choice," he said, his tone soft but confident. "This is your time, Susie." But what Susie didn't know was that every moment, every step of this journey, had been carefully orchestrated. The smaller vessel wasn't just a symbol of exclusivity. It was a key piece of the plan I had crafted with Winston. The further she ventured into this world, the harder it would be for her to turn back. Below deck, Winston exchanged a quick nod with the captain, signaling the transition to the next phase. The boat wasn't just taking Susie to a destination, it was taking her further away from the life she had abandoned, from the lies she had built, and from any chance of returning to the world she once knew. As Susie stood on the deck, the wind whipping through her hair, she looked out at the endless expanse of ocean before her. It felt like a new beginning, a clean slate. She glanced back at Winston, who stood beside her, his expression calm and confident. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice light with curiosity. "To a place where you can finally be free," he replied, his words laden with a meaning she couldn't yet comprehend. And the boat disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind the safety of the yacht and the distant lights of the shoreline. The small vessel, sleek and shadowy, sped further into the open sea. Its engines hummed steadily as the glow of the yacht and the faint lights of the distant shoreline disappeared into the darkness. But on the deck of the yacht, I stood motionless, my eyes fixed on the diminishing silhouette of the boat carrying Susie and Winston into the void. The cool night wind tugged at my jacket, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were consumed by a strange mixture of triumph, loss, and vindication. I watched until the boat was nothing but a speck on the horizon, then turned my gaze upward. The stars sparkled indifferently, their beauty untainted by the complexities of human lives. I exhaled slowly, releasing the tension that had built up in my chest. This was the moment I had prepared for, the culmination of weeks of planning and calculated moves. Yet, as much as I wanted to feel victorious, there was an emptiness in the finality of it all. I returned to the cabin of the yacht. I received a message from Winston and stood waiting. His demeanor was calm and assured, as it had been throughout this entire ordeal. "Everything done, for now. She believes this is the life she's always dreamed of." I took the glass, swirling the amber liquid before taking a sip and replying, "And when she realizes the truth?" He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "That's not your concern anymore. You've done what needed to be done. Now it's time for you to move forward." I nodded, setting the glass down. Winston was right. This wasn't about Susie's future, it was about reclaiming mine. The woman I had once loved, the mother of my children, had made her choices. She had built a life on lies and betrayal. And tonight, she had sealed her fate. Now, it was my turn to take back control. As the yacht turned back toward the harbor, I stared out at the dark waves, my thoughts drifting to my boys. They were my anchor, the reason I had endured this storm. Every decision I had made, every move I had calculated, was for them. Susie had chosen a path that excluded them, and for that, I couldn't forgive her. By the time we docked, the first hints of dawn were breaking over the horizon. The soft pinks and oranges of the sky felt like a bittersweet reminder that life would go on, no matter how fractured it had become. I stepped off the yacht, my mind already focused on the next steps. There was no time for regret or hesitation. A few days later, I back at home. The house was quiet. The boys were asleep, their small forms curled under blankets that provided a semblance of security. I stood in the doorway of their room, watching them for a long moment. They were my priority now, my reason for moving forward. Whatever guilt or doubt lingered in my mind dissolved as I thought of them. They deserved stability, love, and a future free from the chaos Susie had created. I retreated to my office, where the documents I had meticulously prepared were waiting. The copies of Susie's passport, provided by Winston, were at the top of the stack. Her signature had already been replicated with precision, ensuring everything would proceed without a hitch. I picked up the stack of papers, the divorce petition, the custody agreement, the financial disclosures. Each document represented a step toward the life I wanted to rebuild for myself and the boys. I double-checked every detail, ensuring there were no mistakes. Then, with a steady hand, I signed the final page, sealing the fate of a marriage that had long since died. The following day, I delivered the documents to my lawyer. He scanned through them, nodding with approval. "This is airtight," he said, looking up at me. "Once these are filed, she won't have a leg to stand on. The custody arrangements favor you, and the financial terms are more than fair." "That's all I care about," I replied, my voice firm. "I don't want a drawn-out battle. I just want this over with." He nodded again, placing the documents into a folder. "It will be. I'll file these tomorrow." As I left the office, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. The end was in sight. The years of lies, betrayal, and heartache were finally coming to a close. But as much as I wanted to celebrate the steps I had taken, I knew there was still work to be done. What do you think of Jack's decisions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Episode 4, Revenge and Its Consequences. The days after Susie's departure brought a strange calm to the house, but the boys began noticing the absence of their mother. At first, they were content with my vague answers about her being away on a trip, but as days turned into weeks, their questions grew more frequent and insistent. "Where's Mom?" my youngest son, Ethan, asked one morning, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. "Is she coming back soon?" I hesitated, the weight of my deception pressing heavily on me. "She's taking some time for herself," I said gently. "She needed to figure some things out." Ethan frowned, clearly unsatisfied. "But why can't we talk to her? She didn't even say goodbye." My older son, Liam, chimed in, his tone sharper. "Yeah, Dad, why hasn't she called? Doesn't she miss us?" Their words cut deeper than I expected, but I forced myself to stay composed. "She loves you both very much," I assured them, "and I'm sure she'll reach out when she's ready. Right now, let's focus on us, okay? We have each other, and that's what matters." They nodded reluctantly, their trust in my words a painful reminder of the responsibility I carried. As they returned to their breakfast, I resolved to find a way to address their growing doubts without unraveling the delicate web I had woven. The boys, still grappling with the sudden changes, frequently brought up Susie in ways that cut deeper than they could understand. "Dad," Liam began one evening as I cleaned up after dinner, "when's the last time you talked to Mom?" I froze momentarily, the question catching me off guard. I turned, my face composed. "It's been a while," I admitted. "She's sorting things out right now." "Sorting what out?" Ethan chimed in, his young voice filled with innocent curiosity. "Did she leave because of us?" No, I said quickly, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "This has nothing to do with you. Your mom loves you both so much. Sometimes grown-ups just need time to figure things out. But no matter what, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." They nodded slowly, their trust in my words a bittersweet reminder of how deeply they relied on me now. I hugged them both, feeling the weight of their small arms around me, a quiet promise to shield them from the storm I had unleashed. Meanwhile, Anne's suspicions had begun to surface. She had been texting and calling Susie without success, her messages growing more frequent and frantic. It wasn't long before she reached out to me, her tone laced with concern. "Jack, have you heard from Susie?" she asked during a phone call. "I've been trying to get in touch with her, but she's not responding. This isn't like her." I feigned ignorance, my voice steady. She mentioned wanting some time to herself. I said, maybe she's just relaxing for a while. And wasn't convinced. That doesn't sound like Susie. She would have told me if she was going off the grid. Something's not right. Her determination worried me, and was too close to Susie, too invested in their friendship to let this go easily. If she started digging, it wouldn't take long for her to realize something was amiss. I needed to act quickly to divert her attention and ensure she wouldn't interfere. That night, as the boys slept, I sat at my desk, crafting the next phase of my plan. Anne's loyalty to Susie could either be my downfall or my salvation, depending on how I played it. I opened Susie's email account, one of the few remnants of her digital life that I still had access to. The email I drafted was carefully worded, designed to sound like Susie's voice. I painted a picture of her new life in Africa, one of luxury and fulfillment. "Dear Anne," I began, "I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner. Everything happened so fast, and I've been trying to adjust to this new chapter. I found a place where I truly feel like myself, away from the chaos and expectations. Winston has been incredible, and I've never felt more at peace. Please don't worry about me. I'm happy here, and I don't want to look back. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend, but I need to let go of my old life, including everyone in it. Please respect my decision and take care of yourself. Love, Susie." The message was cold, distant, but believable, exactly the tone Susie would adopt to justify her actions. To add weight to the email, I attached a series of doctored photographs, Susie lounging by a pool, sipping champagne in an opulent villa, and smiling alongside Winston, the images seamlessly edited to sell the illusion. The next morning, I sent the email, then waited. Anne's response came faster than I expected. She called me, her voice tight with emotion. "Jack, I got an email from Susie," she said. "She says she's happy and doesn't want to come back. She even sent pictures. Did you know about this?" I feigned surprise, my tone carefully measured. She mentioned something about wanting a fresh start, but I didn't think she'd cut ties like this. Anne hesitated, her voice wavering. "I don't know. I thought I knew her, but this isn't like her at all. She would never just walk away from her kids, from her friends. She's made her choice," I said gently, steering the conversation. "We can't force her to come back. Maybe it's best if we respect her wishes." Anne sighed heavily, her sadness palpable. "I suppose you're right. It's just hard to accept. She was my best friend." Over the next few days, Anne's inquiries ceased. The email and photos had done their job, convincing her that Susie had truly moved on. But the cost of that belief was evident in Anne's demeanor. She seemed withdrawn, her usual vibrancy dulled by the loss of her friend. One evening, she sent a final email to Susie's account. It was short and heartfelt, a goodbye wrapped in understanding. "Susie, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I want you to know that I forgive you. I hope you find the happiness you're looking for, even if it's without us. Take care, Ah." Reading her words, I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about Anne's feelings, it was about protecting the boys and ensuring that no one questioned Susie's absence. As the days passed, the house grew quieter. The boys adjusted to their new routine, their questions about Susie becoming less frequent, and stopped calling, her belief in Susie's email solidifying her decision to step back. The pieces of my plan had fallen into place, and for the first time in months, I felt a semblance of control. But beneath the surface, a nagging thought lingered. The deception I had crafted, the lies I had told to protect my family, would they come back to haunt me? Or was this the price I had to pay for the freedom and stability I so desperately sought? With and no longer openly questioning Susie's absence, I had achieved what I initially set out to do, but the aftermath of my actions hung heavy in the air. And wasn't as easy to reassure. Though her calls and questions about Susie had lessened after the email, the grief she carried over her friend's abrupt disappearance was evident in every interaction we had. It was subtle at first, long silences, wistful looks, but soon, her sadness became undeniable. A few days later, I ran into and at the grocery store. She approached me hesitantly, her usual vibrant energy replaced by a subdued demeanor. "Jack," she said softly, her voice tinged with hesitation, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "What for?" "I did not advise Susie," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Maybe if I'd been a better friend, she wouldn't have felt the need to leave. I keep replaying our last conversations, wondering if there was something I missed, something I could have done." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. None of this is your fault. Susie made her choices, and there's nothing you could have done to stop her." And nodded, though her expression remained heavy. "I just hope she's happy, wherever she is." "She is," I said firmly, the lie rolling off my tongue with practiced ease. "She's doing what she feels is best for her. That's all any of us can hope for." And forced a small smile, her sadness still lingering. "Take care of the boys, Jack. They're lucky to have you." "Thank you," I said, watching as she walked away, her figure small and weighed down by the loss of her friend. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the email I had sent from Susie's account. The words, the tone, the carefully doctored photographs, it had all worked perfectly, and had accepted the illusion, and her inquiries had ceased. But the emotional toll it had taken on her was undeniable, and for the first time, I felt a twinge of guilt. Yet, despite the pain I had caused her, I couldn't afford to second-guess my decisions. The email had been necessary without it, and might have dug deeper, uncovering truths that could unravel everything I had built. The boys, too, were struggling in their own ways. While they had stopped asking daily about Susie, their occasional questions still carried the sting of longing. One evening, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes. "Dad," he said softly, "do you think Mom misses us?" I hesitated, the question piercing through me. "I think she does," I said finally. "I think she's trying to figure out some things right now, but that doesn't mean she's stopped loving you." Ethan nodded slowly, his small hand clutching his blanket. "I miss her," he whispered. "I know, buddy," I said, leaning down to kiss his forehead, "but we're going to be okay, I promise." As I turned off the light and closed his door, I leaned against the wall, the weight of my lies pressing heavily on my chest. Every word I spoke to them, every reassurance, felt like another brick in the wall I was building to protect them from the truth. But how long could I keep it up? The nights at home grew quieter. The boys were adapting, though the cracks in their resilience showed in small ways. Liam spent more time alone, his once playful nature subdued, while Ethan clung to me more often, his unspoken fears palpable in the way he held my hand or sought my attention. Each of their actions reminded me of the void Susie had left, a void I was desperately trying to fill. On the other hand, had withdrawn completely. Her text about letting go of Susie's disappearance seemed final, but her demeanor whenever we crossed paths was distant and heavy. I couldn't tell if she truly believed Susie's fabricated new life or if she had simply accepted it as the only explanation available. Either way, her silence was a fragile victory, one that left me feeling both relieved and haunted. One evening, after I'd put the boys to bed, I sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house were the only sounds. My thoughts drifted to the email I had sent from Susie's account. The images of her in a villa, smiling alongside Winston, had been crafted to perfection, but their purpose weighed on me, and had responded exactly as I'd hoped, believing Susie's declaration of happiness and moving on. But her lingering sadness, the way she avoided eye contact when we spoke, made me question the morality of my choices. Was it fair to manipulate her emotions to protect my own interests? I reminded myself that this was about the boys, about ensuring their stability, but the doubt lingered, an unwelcome shadow. The next day, and unexpectedly showed up at the boys' soccer practice. It was a crisp afternoon, the field bustling with activity as parents cheered from the sidelines, and approached me hesitantly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Hi, Jack," she said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the noise around us. I replied, surprised to see her. "What brings you here?" She gestured toward the field, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to watch Liam play. I miss seeing him and Ethan. Susie used to send me pictures after their games." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, we stood in awkward silence. Then she spoke again, her tone more determined. "Jack, I need to ask you something. Do you really believe Susie's happy? That she's not coming back?" I tensed, the question hitting harder than I expected. She's made her choice. I don't know what else to say. But don't you think it's strange? She pressed. The suddenness of it all? The way she just disappeared? Her words reignited the unease I had been suppressing, and wasn't entirely convinced. Despite the email, despite the photos, her instincts told her something wasn't right. I needed to reinforce the narrative, to quash her lingering doubts before they turned into action. I said firmly, meeting her gaze. I know this is hard for you. It's hard for all of us, but I've spoken to her. She's happy where she is. She doesn't want to come back, and we need to respect that. And nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. I suppose you're right. I just wish she'd given us a chance to say goodbye. As she walked away, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Anne's questions had been deflected for now, but her sadness lingered like a quiet accusation. I watched her leave, the weight of my deception pressing down on me once again. That evening, as I sat at my desk, I revisited the email I had sent. The words stared back at me, a testament to the lengths I had gone to protect my family. But as effective as they had been, the emotional fallout was undeniable. Anne's grief, the boys' confusion, my own internal conflict, it all stemmed from the choices I had made. The boys, thankfully, seemed to be adjusting better than Anne. Liam's quiet demeanor began to lift as he scored his first goal of the season, earning cheers from his teammates and a rare smile from himself. Ethan, ever the optimist, started drawing pictures of our family, always including Susie, but with a sunny backdrop and happy faces. Look, Dad, Ethan exclaimed one afternoon, holding up one of his drawings. This is us when Mom comes back. See, she's smiling. I crouched down to his level, studying the picture. That's beautiful, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. You're so talented. Do you think she'll like it? He asked, his eyes wide with hope. I think she'd love it, I replied, my heart aching at the sincerity in his voice. While the boys found small moments of joy, I continued to grapple with the consequences of my actions. Anne's presence at the soccer field had been a reminder that, despite my best efforts, the past couldn't be erased completely. The lies I had told were a temporary solution, but their ripple effects were far-reaching. One night, as I stared out the window at the darkened street, I thought about the choices that had led me here. Susie's betrayal, Anne's unwavering loyalty, the boy's innocence. It was all a tangled web of love, pain, and survival. I had done what I believed was necessary, but the cost was a weight I carried every day. The next morning, Anne sent me a message. It was brief but filled with finality. Jack, I've decided to let go of trying to reach Susie. If she's happy, that's all that matters. I'll always miss her, but I need to move forward. Thank you for being honest with me. Take care of yourself and the boys. Reading her words, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Anne's acceptance marked the final piece of my plan falling into place. With her no longer questioning Susie's disappearance, the fragile web of lies I had constructed was now secure. But the cost of that security was undeniable, and sadness, the boys' unanswered questions, and my growing sense of isolation. I stared at the message for a long time, a sense of relief washing over me. Anne's acceptance marked the end of her questions, the final piece of my plan falling into place. But as much as I wanted to feel victorious, all I felt was exhaustion. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, the cool night air brushing against my skin. The stars above were distant and unchanging, a stark contrast to the turmoil of human lives. I thought about Susie, now far away, living the life she had chosen, or so she believed. I thought about Anne, carrying the weight of a friendship she couldn't save. And I thought about my boys, their innocence a constant reminder of why I had done everything I had. For now, the house was quiet, the boys were safe, and was at peace, and Susie was a distant memory. But the cost of that peace lingered in the silence, a quiet echo of the choices I had made. Episode 5, Starting Over, The Cost of Freedom. A year had passed since Susie's departure, and life had settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. The boys had adapted remarkably well, their laughter filling the house in ways that made the quiet absence of their mother less noticeable. I had thrown myself into being a present father, ensuring they never felt the void Susie had left. But the cost of my choices lingered beneath the surface. Yet, as much as I had succeeded in creating stability, there were moments when the weight of it all affected me. One crisp autumn morning, as I prepared breakfast, Ethan bounded into the kitchen with his usual energy. "Dad, guess what?" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, setting down a plate of pancakes. "I got an A on my math test," he announced proudly, holding up the paper. "That's amazing, Ethan," I said, ruffling his hair. "I'm so proud of you." Liam entered the room more quietly, his demeanor still reserved but less withdrawn than it had been months ago. He sat at the table, pouring syrup over his pancakes. "Good job, Ethan," he said, his voice steady but kind. The sight of them, happy and thriving, gave me a sense of purpose. Whatever guilt I carried, whatever doubts lingered, moments like these reminded me why I had done what I had. They were my world, and I would do anything to protect them. Later that day, as I worked from my home office, a notification appeared on my phone. It was a message from Anne, though we hadn't spoken much in recent months. Her text carried a tone of familiarity. "Hi, Jack, I hope you and the boys are doing well. I just wanted to check in. It's been a while, and I've been thinking about Susie lately. Let me know if you have time to catch up." Her message stirred a mix of emotions. Over the past year, Anne had remained distant, but it was clear she hadn't fully moved on from Susie's absence. I considered ignoring the message, but something about it felt different. There was a weight to her words, as though she wasn't just reaching out to reconnect, she was seeking closure. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Hi, we're doing well, thanks for asking. I hope you're doing okay too. Let me know when you'd like to meet, and we can catch up." Her response came quickly. "How about lunch tomorrow? My treat," I agreed, curious about what she might have to say. The following day, I met Anne at a small cafe near the park. She looked well, though there was a subtle tiredness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. As we exchanged pleasantries, I noticed her hesitation, as if she were trying to find the right words to say. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, "about Susie, about everything that happened." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "What's on your mind?" Anne sighed, her gaze distant. "I've been trying to let go, like I told you before, but it's harder than I thought. Susie was my best friend, and even though I accepted, it still feels uncomfortable." Her words made my chest tighten, but I maintained my composure. "Sometimes we don't get the closure we want," I said carefully. "We just have to find a way to move forward." She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine. "Have you been able to move forward, Jack, with everything that happened?" Her question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. "I've tried," I said finally, "for the boys' sake. I've had to," and nodded slowly, her expression softening. "You've done an incredible job with them. I can see how much they've grown, how happy they are. Susie would be proud of you." Her words, though kind, carried a bittersweet weight. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means a lot." As we continued to talk, and shared more about her own struggles, I placed a reassuring hand on hers. After lunch, we parted ways, and I returned home feeling both relieved and unsettled. Anne's words lingered in my mind, a reminder of the emotional fallout from everything I had orchestrated. While the boys had adjusted to life without Susie, and Anne had seemingly accepted her departure, the weight of my choices was a constant companion. That evening, as I tucked the boys into bed, Ethan held up another drawing he had made. This one depicted our family standing under a rainbow, all of us smiling. "This is us, Dad," he said proudly, happy and together. I smiled, my throat tightening. "It's beautiful, Ethan, you did a great job." As I kissed him goodnight and turned off the light, I couldn't help but wonder if the happiness he depicted was something I could truly provide. The lies I had told, the secrets I kept, they were all for his and Liam's sake, but at what cost to my own peace? Later that night, as I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, I stared out at the darkened street. The cool air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves, a reminder of the changing seasons. A year ago, my life had been consumed by betrayal and anger, by a desperate need to protect my boys and reclaim control. Now, as I sat in the stillness of the night, I realized that while I had achieved stability, the scars of what I had done would never fully fade. The boys were thriving, and was moving forward. Susie was gone, but the weight of my choices lingered, a constant reminder of the price I had paid for freedom. And as I raised my glass to the stars, I whispered a silent promise to keep moving forward, no matter how heavy the past. Years passed, and life unfolded in ways I hadn't anticipated. The house, once filled with the chaos of two young boys, had grown quieter as Liam and Ethan matured. They were no longer the wide-eyed children who had clung to my every word. Liam was now a teenager, taller than me and filled with the quiet confidence of someone discovering his place in the world. Ethan, though still playful, had developed a thoughtful streak that reminded me so much of his mother, something I tried not to dwell on. The boy's growth became my anchor, the reason I pressed forward despite the lingering weight of the choices I had made. Every milestone they reached was a testament to the stability I had fought to create. Liam's first soccer tournament victory, Ethan's science fair triumph, they were moments that filled the void left by Susie's absence. By now, the questions about Susie had almost entirely ceased. When she came up, it was in passing, as if she were a distant relative whose presence had faded over time. Liam, ever pragmatic, seemed to have accepted the narrative I had carefully constructed about her new life. Ethan, though more sentimental, rarely voiced his thoughts about her anymore. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Ethan looked up from his plate, a rare seriousness in his expression. "Dad," he began, "do you ever think about Mom?" The question caught me off guard, though I suppose it was inevitable. "Of course I do," I replied, keeping my tone measured. "She was a big part of our lives." "Do you miss her?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated, then nodded. "I miss the good times we had as a family," I said honestly, "but I'm grateful for what we have now. You and Liam are my world." Ethan seemed satisfied with my answer, though his thoughtful silence lingered for the rest of the evening. My professional life had flourished during these years. With the chaos of the past behind me, I had thrown myself into my work, building a career that provided not only financial stability but also a sense of accomplishment. The long hours and challenging projects kept my mind occupied, leaving little room for regret or introspection. Yet, in the quiet moments late at night, when the house was still, I would find myself grappling with the echoes of the past. The choices I had made, the lies I had told to protect the boys, weighed on me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. I knew I had done what was necessary, but the cost of those decisions was a constant companion. One spring afternoon, Liam came to me with a surprising request. "Dad," he said, his voice steady, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, setting down the book I was reading. "I've been thinking about going to college out of state," he said. "I want to explore new places, meet new people." The idea of him leaving filled me with a mix of pride and dread. Liam had always been independent, but the thought of him stepping out into the world on his own was a reminder of how quickly time was slipping by. "That's a big decision," I said carefully. "Have you thought about where you'd like to go?" He nodded. "I've been looking at schools on the East Coast. They have great programs for what I want to study." "And what's that?" I asked, curious. "Psychology," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I want to understand people, their decisions, what makes them who they are." His answer struck a chord. I couldn't help but wonder if his interest in psychology stemmed, in part, from our family's complicated history. "I think that's a great choice," I said, patting his shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Ethan, meanwhile, had discovered a passion for art. His sketches and paintings adorned the walls of the house, each piece more impressive than the last. He often lost himself in his work, the creative process a refuge for his sensitive soul. One evening, as he worked on a painting in the garage, I stood in the doorway, watching him. "That's incredible, Ethan," I said, admiring the vibrant colors and intricate details. "You've got real talent." He glanced over his shoulder, a shy smile on his face. "Thanks, Dad, it helps me think about stuff." "What kind of stuff?" I asked, stepping closer. "Life," he said simply, his brush gliding across the canvas. "How everything fits together." His words reminded me of how much he had grown, how his once childish musings had transformed into deeper reflections. I couldn't help but feel a pang of pride and sadness at the young man he was becoming. As the years went by, the life we had built felt both satisfying and incomplete. The boys were thriving, and I had found a sense of purpose in guiding them through their teenage years. But the scars of the past remained, hidden beneath the surface of our carefully constructed normalcy. One evening, as I sorted through an old box of photos, I stumbled upon a picture of Susie holding Ethan as a baby, her smile radiant. For a moment, I allowed myself to linger on the memory, the bittersweet ache of what had been and what had been lost. But I knew better than to dwell. Susie was gone, her absence a necessary chapter in our story. The life we had now, while imperfect, was ours. It was a life built on resilience, on the determination to move forward despite the weight of the past. The boys' milestones continued to bring light into my life. Liam graduated high school with honors, his acceptance letters to prestigious colleges a testament to his hard work. Ethan's art was featured in a local gallery, his talent earning him recognition and admiration. Through it all, I remained their constant, a steady presence in a world that had once felt so uncertain. Whatever doubts or regrets I carried, I kept them to myself, channeling my energy into being the father they deserved. Late one night, as I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. I had done what I believed was right, even when it was hard, and while the weight of those choices would always be with me, I had found a way to move forward. The boys were my legacy, their strength and happiness the ultimate measure of my success. As the wind whispered through the trees, I raised my glass to the night, a silent toast to the life we had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Years slipped by, almost unnoticed, as life settled into a quiet and steady rhythm. The chaos and turmoil of the past felt like a distant memory, replaced by the measured cadence of raising two boys who had grown into exceptional young men. Liam was now thriving in college, sending updates about his psychology courses and the new friends he'd made. Ethan, still at home, had turned the garage into an art studio, his work becoming increasingly intricate and deeply personal. The house was quieter now, not in a lonely way but in a way that reflected how much had changed. It was a place of peace, of calm evenings and quiet conversations, the air no longer heavy with questions about the past. My mornings started early, often with a cup of coffee on the porch, and my evenings ended late, usually with Ethan showing me his latest piece or Liam calling to share his excitement about a project. One evening, as Ethan worked on a large canvas in the garage, I joined him, leaning against the doorframe. "How's it coming along?" I asked, nodding toward the swirling blues and golds that seemed to dance across the canvas. He turned, his face streaked with smudges of paint, and smiled. "Good, it's almost done. This one's for the gallery showcase next month." I stepped closer, marveling at the detail in his work. "You've really outdone yourself this time," I said sincerely. "It's incredible." "Thanks, Dad," he replied, his voice soft but warm. "I think this one's special." "It is," I agreed. "You've got a gift, Ethan." He grinned, then turned back to his work, lost once again in his world of colors and shapes. Watching him, I felt a swell of pride, the kind that made every sacrifice, every hard decision, feel worthwhile, whatever doubts I had carried over the years. Moments like this reminded me that I had done something right. Liam's visits home became less frequent as he immersed himself in his studies and campus life. When he did come back, the house buzzed with energy, his laughter filling the rooms as he recounted stories of late-night study sessions and weekend adventures with his friends. One weekend, as we sat around the fire pit in the backyard, Liam turned to Ethan and said, "You should come visit sometime. The art scene on campus is amazing. You'd love it." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Absolutely," Liam said. "There's this gallery downtown that does monthly showcases for local artists. You should submit something." Ethan glanced at me, his excitement tempered by uncertainty. "What do you think, Dad?" I smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I think it's a great idea. You've got the talent, Ethan. It's time to share it with the world." As the months passed, I found myself with more time on my hands. The demands of parenting had shifted as the boys grew more independent, leaving me to explore parts of my life I had long neglected. I took up running again, something I hadn't done since my early 20s. The rhythmic pounding of my feet against the pavement became a form of therapy, a way to clear my mind and reconnect with myself. I also began volunteering at a local community center, helping to organize events for underprivileged kids. It was fulfilling work, a reminder that even in the smallest ways, I could make a difference. The center became a second home, a place where I found purpose outside of being a father. One day, as I sorted through old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a photo album I hadn't seen in years. Flipping through its pages, I saw snapshots of the life we had once had: birthday parties, family vacations, quiet moments captured in Polaroids. There were photos of Susie and me, smiling and happy, oblivious to the storm that would one day consume us. For a moment, I let myself linger on those memories, not with sadness but with a quiet acceptance. The life we had shared was real, and so was the pain that followed. But as I closed the album and placed it back in the box, I realized something: the past no longer held power over me. It was a chapter that had ended, and I had moved on. The following week, Ethan came home with a surprise. "Dad," he said, holding up an envelope, "I got accepted into the residency program at the gallery downtown." "That's amazing," I said, pulling him into a hug. "I'm so proud of you, Ethan." "It's a big step," he admitted, his excitement tinged with nervousness, "but I think I'm ready." "You are," I said firmly. "You've worked hard for this, and you deserve every bit of success that comes your way." His smile was radiant, a reflection of the confidence he had grown into. Watching him, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Whatever mistakes I had made, whatever lies I had told, they had been worth it to see him and Liam thrive. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. Liam graduated with honors, securing a position at a renowned research institute. Ethan's art gained recognition beyond our small town, his name appearing in articles and interviews. The house, once the center of our world, became quieter still as they pursued their dreams. But I never felt alone. Their success, their happiness, was enough to fill any void, and in their achievements, I found my own sense of fulfillment. They were my legacy, a testament to the strength and resilience we had built together. On a crisp autumn morning, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal, the lies, the sacrifices, they were all part of a story that had shaped who we were. But those chapters were behind us now, replaced by new ones filled with hope and promise. The boys were thriving, I had found peace, and though the scars of the past would always remain, they no longer defined us. We had built a life of love, resilience, and strength, a life that was entirely our own. As the wind rustled the leaves, I raised my mug to the horizon, a silent toast to the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free and happy. Jack's journey has come full circle, from betrayal and heartache to hope and fulfillment. What do you think of the life he's built for himself and his sons? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on more stories like this one.